there is a myriapod, which is the important specimen in this piece, along with a few other things which we will try to preserve either with the myriapod or in a separate piece. And to do so, I guess the first thing we need to do is mark where the important inclusions are. And so I've drawn two circles, the larger of which is around the myriapod itself. And then there is a beetle on the other part of the amber with a smaller circle. And the other items that look interesting, both botanical and a small fly, are close enough to the myriapod to be within the circle that I just made. So then what has to happen to make it a piece like this usable is to divide it into smaller pieces with the inclusion safely intact in the sections. And so I've drawn this line, which would be a line to cut the piece. All right. So here we go over to the saw, which is and this is a simple rock cutting saw using water to cool it and help guide, keep the blade from overheating. And now it's pretty simple to cut these, but you have to follow the line that we created. And pretty much right on the line. And you take your time, because you don't want to force it and cause a crack or something to occur. And I'm well outside the circles that I've drawn. Now this piece is a little large, so I'm rotating the piece to get it fully cut. There it goes. And that actually cut it along a plane by just rotating it. And now the next thing to do is to check the piece and make sure that this little sliver, which looks harmless enough, didn't get too close to anything. I would see here is that there's a flow line that was disrupted, but it's far from the insects, and that was pulled off. Sometimes the amber, because it often is composed of internal flows, one over the other, the flows can separate. Sometimes that's good, because sometimes you can reveal a much better surface right near the insect than before. Other times you want to avoid it if it's going to go through an insect. So now we go back to the scope. I will see what we've done. And okay, looking at it, the myriapod is completely intact. It's there. I'm noticing for the first time a potential other object in here, but I'll worry about that later. You can now see the myriapod from several different sides. More light is being emitted now into the piece, so actually it looks a lot better than it did. And the beetle's been completely removed. It's over here in this other larger piece, which I'm less concerned with right now, because I believe the beetle is going to be considered fairly common, but I did want to preserve it, and so it is now separated. I don't see anything else of major import in this piece, at least that I'm aware of, but again, everything that is in this side of the piece is intact, and nothing was compromised in any way. So I'll put that aside, or back in its bag actually, for later examination. And I will take this piece that I now know is safely cut and polish it so that we can reveal what view might be obtained. And here we go. This thing's a little loud, but it does the job. This thing is actually a workhorse, which we've had for, I'd say, 15 years here. And it's only needed one, I believe, solenoid or something replaced at one point in time, but it really can handle a lot of abuse. All right, so the first thing I do is I wet that base paper I have there, and that will allow me to adhere another piece of paper on top of it. And the paper I've got here, I'll turn the water up a little bit. There we go. This is a very fine 320 grit, or very coarse, I should say, 320 grit piece of wet dry paper, which is used. It's called Carbomet, and it has. It's not like diamond paper. It's softer. And so then I take this, and I'm basically grinding here. This is not yet polishing it, but I'm getting those saw marks off of it and smoothing the surface. And I think it's smooth now. And then I go to the next finest grit, which happens to be the one I normally use. This is a 400 grit. And what that does is it removes the scratches that this first piece put there. Then we go ahead and take 600 paper. And that's finer than the 400, obviously. And so we do that just for a short period of time. And now it's beginning to look like you can see through this piece on that side. And finally, I finish it off with what we call 4000. It actually isn't 4000 grit. It's about maybe 800 or 900 grit, but it's called P4000, and it is actually the finest grit size we have here at the museum. And now what I've done is I've polished this piece, and as it happens, because this is Baltic amber, it takes a very nice polish, as does Dominican, Burmese amber, and a few other deposits. Most of them, though, are less polished less nicely than this. I did notice here that there's a flat surface. There's actually two flat surfaces on this side. I noticed when I did this just now that I didn't fully polish the other part of it because it angled down a little bit on one side. So I'm going to do that now. I'm holding it at a slight angle so that I make sure that that side of the piece is addressed. It looks better. It may not be perfect, but it's good enough for our purposes in order to see the view of the myriapod inside. All right, so again, I walk over to the scope to check it out, and there it is. And what I've discovered is that you can sort of see the myriapod through a internal, what we call an internal dirty flow, which is basically an area in the amber in which one flow came over another, but which left particulate matter in place on a kind of curved, flat surface. And so you can't really get to the myriapod on this side because it's really right above that flow. But what this has done is it's allowed us to look at some other things in this piece that I wanted to preserve, including what looked like some interesting botanicals and maybe some trichomes, which one of our colleagues studies, so this might prove interesting to him. Now, I've stabilized this piece. The myriapod is there, and I basically undertook this exercise to show that in most cases, when you are preparing amber, you really want to isolate the inclusions and get the optimal views. Usually you want at least 3 good views, and maybe as many as you can get, but 3 at a minimum if you can get them, including a frontal shot of the head and those features, a dorsal view of the top of the insect or arachnid, and especially if it has wings that are folded. And you also want to get a lateral view of the animal. And so I haven't done all of that yet on this piece, but I will now do so.